Spectrovision Radio.
Our government remote viewed the Ark of the Covenant, and the findings will absolutely blow you away. We're about to go over them page for page, and I'm going to break it down. We're going to deep dive on the most amazing remote viewing session ever done. And I'm also going to take it further because in my additional research, I've been able to link the Ark of Covenant back to ancient Egypt, but even back further to the Atlanteans. And there seems to be a connection between the unveiling of the Ark of the Covenant and what might be happening around Easter of 2026, as proposed by the Lady and Chris Bledsoe and even Edgar Cayce, having to do with the Atlantean archive underneath the right paw of the Sphinx. This seems to all be connected, and I have surrendered to the idea that I'm supposed to follow this red thread that connects all of these areas and treat myself as an intuitive investigator. And I was led to do this by following my intuition. And I've unveiled and discovered a few other things that really take this whole Ark of Covenant thing in a completely different direction that I'd never intended or expected. And I'm going to lay it all out for you today. This is a super exciting episode that piggybacks off of last week's. We did a two-part banger on the analysis and assessment of the gateway process. And we learned that in 1983, the Army was rapidly training psychic spies to compete with Russia's psychic spies. And we got really, really good at remote viewing. And we started these remote viewing teams. The first project was Project Stargate, which everyone knows about. And that led into something called Project Sunstreak. And I teased this last week about how Project Sunstreak remote viewed the Ark of the Covenant. And I had a bunch of people blow me up and say, hey, let's double click on that because that's wild. So I said, okay, let's do a whole deep dive on it. So I'm going to take you through all of the now declassified papers, and it is wild. I mean, we're talking about Seraphim angels. We're talking about basically describing this thing in such detail, telling what it is, where it came from, what the point of it is, what's inside of it, what happens if you touch it. Don't do that, and all sorts of other things. So guys, let's absolutely deep dive into the remote viewing session of the Ark of the Covenant. Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Conscious Observers. So today's episode is absolutely bananas. I mean, we're going to go not only every single word of this, I'm going to put it up on the screen. So if you're watching this episode, you're going to get to see everything. And if you're not watching, I will do my best to describe everything that I'm showing in great detail. All of these images will also be on my Patreon. So go check that out and you'll see everything. And then also, if you can only listen right now and not watch, later on, go check out the video version on Spotify or on YouTube. So let's just dive right in, friends. I'm going to share my screen and pull up page 1 of this report. Now, real quick, if you don't know what remote viewing is, it's essentially this. It is a psychic ability, but everybody can do it. It's something that you can learn. It's trainable, where you can essentially gather information. That information can come in all sorts of different forms from a person, place, thing that is not local to you, meaning it could be separated by space, by time, by, it could be on the other side of the universe. And you can, with your perception, consciously go there and see it, experience it, gather information, and then bring that back all through just memories, just data that you're retrieving mentally. It's really amazing. In this, they use something called CRV, which is a military version. It's controlled remote viewing. And there are, it's a very structured method. So there's actually 6 stages in controlled remote viewing. It goes all the way from stage 1, which is just like ideograms, to stage 6, which is like 3D modeling. I'll break it all down as we go through this. The viewers only get coordinates. Okay, the remote viewers have no idea. It's completely blind. They have no idea what they're remote viewing. And in this particular case, they had multiple remote viewers remote viewing the same target, and they all nailed it. But this one in particular is exceptional. So I chose it to be the focus tonight. Now, we don't know exactly who remote viewed it. It's remote viewer number 032. We think it's Paul Smith or Lynn Buchanan are the most likely candidates. They were at, for Meade at this time. They were a part of this project. It matches the way that they write and stuff like that. I'm leaning towards more Lynn Buchanan, but I'm not sure. Could be either one of those guys. Could be somebody else. We don't know for sure, but those are the two leading candidates, and they were two of the best in the world. So, it makes sense that this is this accurate and this good. So basically, what happens is they give them a coordinates, just a series of numbers. In this case, it was 781, 410, 1101, 21. And these numbers mean nothing, but they're quantumly entangled with the target. So when you remote view those numbers, the data is like a hyperlink on a computer. You click on the hyperlink, it takes you to a website. That's kind of how this is. You remote view those numbers, and it's entangled. It's connected. It's hyperlinked in the information sphere. This is based all on the fact that information is basically fundamental. Consciousness is this non-local field that you can access the information field and just get data from anywhere and bring it back with your mind. And so you're accessing that field. So this number is like a hyperlink to something else. And in this case, it's hyperlinked to the target, which is the Ark of the Covenant. So it's really astonishing because as I'm about to read you the remote viewer's notes, and now that you know that the target's the Ark of Covenant, reading their notes, it just blows your mind. But first, this is kind of the cover page of this report. And so I'll just read it from the top. So anyways, this is project number TNG0209. This is the date of December 5th, 1988. And the remote viewer 032, like we said. Now, they say that the mission is to access and describe the target identified by the coordinates. And then it says the comments, training target number 0209 is the Ark of the Covenant. Now, just right there, let's stop and just give a little bit of appreciation to the fact that our government had the best remote viewers in the world, trained so ridiculously well. They were so good at what they did, and they can remote view anything they want. And they did. But they were like, hey, let's remote view the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, it's really astonishing to me because so many people argue, does it even exist? Is it still around? Was it destroyed? Was it lost? All these things. And, here 40 years ago almost, we have, some very rich data suggesting that, yes, this is absolutely real, and they kind of know where it is. Really amazing stuff here. So the evaluation says, viewer number 032 attained excellent sight contact, doing very well with stage 4 structure. That's the matrix part. Viewer also exhibits the ability to keep AOL to a minimum. AOL means analytical overlay. That's essentially whenever your left brain kicks in and starts analyzing things. Remote viewing is a very right brain thing. You get into this sort of meditative state and your left brain goes to sleep in a way, kind of like what happens with meditation or hypnosis, and it stops analyzing things, and you just go with your right brain intuition, and you're supposed to just, as things come in, just immediately write them down, jot them down, scribble them out. That's why remote viewing looks kind of messy, like a lot of little scribbles and line drawings, because it's just as this data is coming in, it could be sounds, it could be colors, feelings, sights, all sorts of things. You just write it down. And there's different columns and different ways that CRV is structured, and I'll show you what that means as we go through. But essentially, if you ever start getting an AOL, meaning your left brain starts waking up and kicking in and analyzing, you're supposed to jot that down and say like AOL break. That way you know, and the advisor knows that that is a left brain analysis and maybe isn't quite accurate because it's not purely your right brain intuition. So that's what they mean by this viewer also exhibits the ability to keep AOL to a minimum. That's very good for remote viewing. Have to be careful with editing though. This does not seem to be a problem at this time, just something to watch for. So don't even know why they said that. But let's go on. This is the most awesome page ever in all pages. So knowing what you know already, that this is remote viewing the Ark of the Covenant, this is what the remote viewer, like I said, we think Paul Smith or Lynn Buchanan, but it could be anybody. That's just complete speculation. But it's viewer number 032, and this is their notes after the case, after the fact. And remember, they don't know what they're remote viewing. They have no idea. They just know it's a series of numbers. That's all they know. So this is their summary. Target is a container. This container has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to AOL, a coffin. So they write AOL because at that point his left brain's kicking in. You can tell he's like, it's similar to, and he's probably thinking, what is it similar to? That little bit of analysis there, that's AOL. It doesn't mean it's wrong at all. It's just you have to decipher between your left and right brain when you're doing this. So the target is similar in shape to a coffin and is decorated with seraphim. Very specific. says, see sketch 16. Seraphim, if you don't know, are like the biblical angels. This target is located somewhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seem to be Arabic. This is going to really play a part later when I get into the Egyptian part, possible location, and ties to Atlantis. So just remember that. This target is located somewhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seemed to be Arabic. Visuals of surrounding buildings indicated the presence of mosque domes. See page 12. Individuals in the area were clothed in virtually all white and had black hair and dark eyes. One figure I homed in on wore a mustache. So you got mosque domes, you have people speaking Arabic, you have people walking around in all white robes, some people with mustaches, dark eyes, dark hair. The target is hidden, underground, dark and wet, were all aspects of the location of the target. So it's hidden, underground, dark and wet. The purpose of the target is to bring a people together. See page 16. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, and the resurrection. Oof. I mean, really setting the stage here. The resurrection. And this is going to really play a part when I go into how I was able to kind of tie this back to the prophecy of Chris Bledsoe and the Lady and Edgar Cayce and the underground Atlantean archive. This is all very, very important. So them saying specifically that this is an aspect of spirituality, information, and historical knowledge. So they say there is an aspect of spirituality, information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we now know. Far beyond what we now know. Now, if you remember, Chris Bledsoe said that the Lady told him that there would be a new knowledge bestowed upon humanity coming up around Easter of 2026. A new knowledge bestowed upon humanity. That means a knowledge that we don't know. We're not privy to. That means some completely new knowledge. What they're saying here is that information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we now know. Very similar wording. The target is protected by entities. Entities, not people, entities. See page 14. We'll get there. It's wild. And can only be opened by those who are authorized to do so. This container will not and cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. This is really interesting because Edgar Cayce, when he was talking about the Hall of Records, the Atlantean Library, he said the same thing, that it's basically the collective consciousness has to be at an equilibrium with the information inside, because if it's opened too soon, it can lead to our demise and destruction. But if it's not opened in time, we actually need that information to, I think, save ourselves. So it's a very specific time frame that we're supposed to get this knowledge. So he says that this target is protected by entities and can only be opened by those who are authorized to do so. This container cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. Once it is time to open the container, the mechanics of the lock system will be found to be very simple. So basically saying this thing isn't even hard to open. It's not time. So it's not that we can't get into it. It's that it's like a time lock. It's really wild. And they go on. Check this out. So they say once it's time to open the container, the mechanics of the lock system will be found to be very simple. So it's not some complex thing that we have to break some lock or anything. Individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors. See page 17. Okay. I think that's worth reading again. Individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us. Okay. So he's not saying that the ark itself, in this case, he doesn't know it's an ark. He just calls it a container. He has no idea what this thing is. He's not saying the ark itself will destroy you. So if you try to take a bat to it or a crowbar or some sort of a drill or something, he's not saying that the ark itself will destroy you. He's saying that the protectors, that there are these people, these beings, they say specifically entities, not people, entities, that there's these entities that are guarding it, and that if you try to open it before it's time through brute force, you will be destroyed by those entities. I mean, so don't try it. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual remote viewing. So this is at the very beginning, so this would be stage 1, and you can see that it's going to mostly be ideograms and just rough, things that are coming to you, like raw things. Like at this point, you haven't had a chance to really deep dive on it. This is just raw data. So you just see some lines here. They have some rising, arcing cross, sloping down, land. So this is very simple. Green, brown, rough, smooth, cool voices. These are the stage 2 data that he's getting here. So green, brown, rough, smooth, cool voices. These are just sensory data that's coming in. He's just jotting it down. You have a couple lines that he's drawing here. Let's go on to the next page. This is still S2, so stage 2. You have green, gray, blue, rough, smooth, cool, cold, wind, sound, voice, open, wide, high, low. Okay, so those are just some of the stuff coming to him. This is just the very beginning stages here. Brown, gray, tan, rough. All right, so kind of painting a picture here. Let's go on the next page. Wet, moist, cold, dark, vertical, I think it says. This is hard to read some of this scribble here, but they're in kind of a meditative state as they're doing this. Dark, square. So square room, dark. They say wet, moist, cold, dark. So painting a picture that this is some sort of a basement type of a, not outside, it's definitely inside. There's an archway. Drew a picture of an archway. Some bricks. You can tell it's bricks, so it's some sort of a stone. And then there's these like molding, kind of a crown molding on the exterior, giving an impression of the type of architecture. Some sort of a hill. It's hard to tell. Some sort of a bulldozer type of a equipment. Okay, now we're getting into the matrix here. So this is stage 4, and it says wet, cold, heavy, solid, thick, high, hollow, container, old. Okay. Under, around, above, around, inside, outside. Okay. Container, containment, steel, stone, wood, rooms, many rooms. Sorrow. That's the section where you write the emotion. Sorrow. Then below that, anguish, sorrow. Anguish, sorrow. I cannot read that word. Okay. Let's keep going. Containers. Containment, steel, stone, wood, rooms, many rooms, fortified, guarded, watched, fortified, guarded, watched. Very specific. Then he says something very interesting. AOL, break, prison. Oh, AOL, break, prison. So he's saying, okay, this is part of his analytical overlay. His analytical mind's trying to figure out, what is this place? So he wrote AOL break, which means, okay, take this, put this aside. This is me analyzing it. Prison? He's trying to figure out what this is. So that's the impression he's getting, some sort of a prison cell type of a thing. Let's keep going. This is another AOL break here. Prison, yeah. Contain people long ago. Okay. So he's trying to figure it out now. All right. Now he's back into the flow here. Windows, cubic, room, high places. All right. Desk, chairs, walls, hallway, courtyard. That's outside of the room. Resume. Break, broke. It's hard to read that one. Okay. This is when he's starting to get a lot more information here. So you see the mosque that he drew. Okay. This is the picture of the mosque dome with the windows. Voices and people. It says up here on the top left, voices, people. Excited, Arabic, fast. Dark hair, dark eyes, foreign, Middle East accent. Okay. Movement, people, background. White clothes, mustache. Angry, excited. Okay, so that's like when he's outside of the place and he's trying to find this. That's this part of the remote viewing process where you're trying to get the environment, the surroundings. Okay, this is where it gets wild. So now he's back inside the room. Container, right? So he wrote container here. It says double wall, rectangle, rows, double wall. Container, inside a container. Container, inside a container. Dark, wet, wrapped, watched, by whom? Okay, so this part here is nuts. Watched by whom? So see where it says mummies? So he draws a wall. There's a wall with a bunch of people standing against it. And he drew, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people, like stick figures standing against this wall. And he wrote mummies, ? And he wrote watched by whom? So these are the watchers. These are the people watching. So you get the impression that these are those entities he talked about, because he wrote mummies, but they're also the watchers. So how would a mummy watch something? So you're getting this, it's confusing because he's trying to make sense of all this because he doesn't know what he's remote viewing. So watched by whom? Mummies, people, he wrote. Then he wrote AOL break coffins. AOL break coffins. That means his left brain is analyzing it. He's like, okay, well, is this, are these coffins? Like, I don't get it, mummies. Then it says, traveling many places, old, passage, flight, mission, protection. Very interesting. So there's a wall of mummies, these entities watching this thing that is rectangle, double walled, has a container inside of a container. It's dark, it's wet inside the room, that it's been traveling many places, it's old, there's a passage, there's a mission. Then we get into this wheel, metallic, silver, gold, blue, red. He drew a wheel. It looks like a wheel that you would open up a vault on a safe. It says wooden, smells like decay. Go to container and open it, or describe it as you go. That's what he wrote. Go to container and open it. Describe it as you go. So he's describing the container. Rotational. Can't read some of these words. Spirits chest. He wrote AOL break, spirits chest. So that means that's his analysis, right? As he's going along, spirits and chest. So he's getting the impression this is a chest and that there's spirits there. And then he wrote AOL break sarcophagus. All right, next page. Seraphim. He drew a winged, it almost looks like a phoenix, like a flaming phoenix. And he wrote gold next to it. So it's a gold phoenix, but then he wrote seraphim. Very specific. Sometimes you just get knowing. You get this knowing, this download of information when you're remote viewing. So I think that's where the seraphim comes from, because that's so specific. Because he drew what looks like a phoenix, but then he wrote seraphim. And then he says, how is it opened? Next to the seraphim. And then it says, joining together a people. Joining together a people. This is when you get into the later stages of controlled remote viewing and you go into what the purpose is, what the point of it is. You try to get the meaning. So he said, joining together a people. But then he says, ceremonial, death, resurrection, homage, protection. Those are powerful words. Important, historical, spiritual, knowledge, lessons, information. AOL break, coffin or place of burial. That was his kind of analysis. So important, historical, spiritual, knowledge, lessons, information. Joining together a people. It says, how is it opened? With a picture of a seraphim, and it says gold next to it. All right. Then we go into one of the last pages here. It says scared, hurried, wait, burning, destroyed, pain, anguish, horror, terror, quiet, death, scared, burnt, wait, power, forbidden, protection, protected, and lasting. Then at the top says wealth, information, knowledge. These are the different columns. You'll see at the top there's different letters. There's 6, I think, I forget, 6 or 7 different of these columns. Each one means something different. Okay, so that's the report. Now let me go back to the first part. And so after he did all this is just him scribbling things out. And then he describes it. So I'll reread this before I go on to my little presentation. Target is a container. This is him wrapping up his whole thing and just kind of putting it into words after he had time to think about it, and then gather all the downloads and the additional information that came in too. Target is a container. This container has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to a coffin and is decorated with seraphim. This target is located somewhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seemed to be Arabic. Visuals of surrounding buildings indicated the presence of mosque domes. See page 12. Individuals in the area were clothed in virtually all white, had black hair and dark eyes. One figure I homed in on wore a mustache. The target is hidden, underground, dark and wet were all aspects of the location. The purpose of the target is to bring a people together. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, the resurrection. The resurrection. There is an aspect of spirituality, information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we now know. The target is protected by entities and can only be opened by those who are authorized to do so. This container will not and cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. Once it is time to open the container, the mechanics of the lock system will be found to be fairly simple. Individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us. Those protectors were the mummies on the wall, you know? I mean, it's so wild. Okay, so let's go into a couple things here. This picture here, I'm just going to close that out for now. Okay, so that's crazy. Okay, let's go into a few things. Now, the Ark of the Covenant was in the Bible. You know, I'm not a biblical scholar or anything, so correct me where I'm wrong here, but my interpretation of the events that happened was essentially Moses went to Mount Sinai and, you know, received the instructions for it and had it made to a very specific, you know, dimensions and style and all that kind of stuff. And they put in the 10 Commandments, right? I think the first tablets broke, if I remember right, and the second ones they put into the Ark of the Covenant. And then it became sealed and filled with basically the Spirit of God. And then at that point, it couldn't be opened again. And then it was taken essentially from that area of Israel to what's most commonly believed it went to Ethiopia. And it went through Egypt. Most historical accounts have it going through Egypt on its way to Ethiopia. Now, what makes this really interesting is that I'll show you a picture here. Let me pull up this picture real quick because I'm going to show you a picture of the Ark of the Covenant as it is like rendered. This is a digital rendering. Obviously, we don't have an actual picture of it. This is a digital rendering of the Ark of the Covenant based exactly on what the Bible, because the Bible is very specific about how it was made or how it looked. So you can see the two seraphim angels at the top, and you can see how their wings touch. Okay, very specific. That's the seat on the top, and then you can see at the bottom how it has the 4 feet and how it has these 2 poles that go through it, because you couldn't touch the actual Ark of the Covenant. You had these poles, these wooden rods, and that's how people carried it, so that you didn't have to actually touch it. So take a look at this picture, and you can see how it looks. Now, this is incredibly Egyptian to the point where, let me show you something that'll blow your mind. So look at how this looks. So if you're just listening, this is a golden chest with 2 angels on top, and their wings are like thunderbird wings that are touching in the middle. And it's got these 2 long poles sticking out of the bottom. So 4 people, one on each side, can hold this thing, carry it, because it's super duper heavy. Okay, so that's what this looks like. Now, whenever you look at this, now this is I think they called it the chest of Anubis. So Anubis is an Egyptian god of basically the afterlife. It's who helps you transition into the afterlife, to the spirit world. And look at what this thing looks like. Okay, especially considering what we just looked at. The exact same size, dimensions, exact same format. It has the 4 poles people carry. You can't see it all on this screen here, but it looks exactly like the Ark of the Covenant. And on top, there is Anubis, which Anubis is a dog. Now, look at how Anubis is sitting. This is all going to make sense here in a minute. So, look at how Anubis is sitting. What does that remind you of? Look at how his arms are perfectly out in front. Look at how he's sitting up tall. Look at how his legs are. Okay, so this looks just like the Ark of the Covenant. And this predates the Ark of the Covenant by a while. This is Anubis's chest. This is Egyptian. Some people think Atlantean. Okay, now let me show you something else here real quick, which is really going to blow your mind. So remember, Anubis sitting on the chest looks just like the Ark of the Covenant. Now look at this. So this is the Sphinx. Anubis sits and looks identical to the Sphinx. Identical. Couldn't be any more identical. Now you say, okay, but the Sphinx has a cat head, right? Or a human head. It doesn't have a dog head. Well, it's pretty well believed and understood and accepted that the head and the face that are on the Sphinx now are not the original ones. They do not fit. They don't fit the style. They're not proportionate. The head's way too small for that gigantic body. It just doesn't make any sense at all. It makes a lot more sense if the head was Anubis. So on my screen here, I'm showing the Sphinx with Anubis's head. And proportionally, stylistically, everything, it makes so much more sense. It also makes sense if the Ark of the Covenant was actually underneath the Sphinx. Okay, we're going to get into a couple other things here. So let me show you this map. Now, when I first started listening to all this remote viewing data, and I was, and this thought popped into my head, it was, okay, well, if this, because I started thinking that I was like, they're like talking about how this knowledge is coming and all this stuff. And I was just getting this intuitive vibe in my head where I was just like, I wonder if this Ark of the Covenant that has this information inside of it, they're talking about this knowledge that's time released and time locked, and it will be open at a certain point and kind of given to humanity, this new knowledge that we don't have. All these words were reminding me of Chris Bledsoe and the Lady and the knowledge that will be bestowed upon us, and that's coming at a certain point when we're ready for it, and that it's locked away and hidden and all these things. And Edgar Cayce talked about the Atlantean archive, the Hall of Records, what he called it, or the Hall of Amenti, some people call it, but the Atlantean library that Edgar Cayce says is underneath the Sphinx. So when I was looking at this remote viewing data, I was like, okay, well, he would have described, because he was describing, mosques and buildings and people and stuff. He would have described the Sphinx, obviously. I mean, how do you not describe the Sphinx or the pyramids if you're there? But then I remembered something very important, that Edgar Cayce said that the entrance into the underground passageway that takes you to the Atlantean archive is under the paw of the Sphinx, but that the actual archive is halfway between the right paw of the Sphinx and the Nile River. So when you look on the screen here, I have a map, and when you look over here, you'll see those little camera things to the left is the pyramids and the Sphinx, and then over to the right, you'll see the river. It doesn't show perfect line here, but you can see it now. Okay, so on the right of the screen is the Nile River, and on the left is the Giza Plateau. Right in the middle, you're smack dab in the middle of Giza, and you have Cairo. And he was talking about how outside of this building where this Ark of Covenant is contained is what? What did he say? There's people walking around wearing white robes with mustaches, dark hair, dark eyes, speaking Arabic in white robes, and that there's mosques. And the way he described the buildings, that is exactly what you would see in downtown Giza or Cairo. And that is what would be around, like when you're remote viewing and you kind of zoom out, that's what would be around that site. If this is completely speculation, I have no way of knowing any of this, but my thread has been taking me, my Atlantean thread especially, to this like revelation that's coming up at some point, this knowledge that will be bestowed upon us. And I've been trying to figure out what is this knowledge and where's it coming from and where's it stored. And so much of it has taken me to the Atlantean records that supposedly exist. And so when you think of the Ark of the Covenant, you might say, okay, well, before I get off this page, just look at this one last time and just look directly in the middle between, so just imagine like underneath this city here could be this like tunnel system. And there's these rooms, and one of the rooms has the Ark of the Covenant, because so many people think that that they took the Ark of the Covenant from Israel to Ethiopia, and they even know the exact church it's at and everything. You want to tell me the most powerful weapon on earth is in some place in Ethiopia, and we're just letting it happen? We haven't invaded and destroyed the place and taken it. I mean, come on. So I don't think it's there. I think it's here. I don't think it ever made it there. I think that it went to Egypt, returned to Egypt, and stayed there. And I think that's the entire point of the Sphinx and the pyramid. It all has to do with the coming vernal equinox on March 20th, and the alignment of the stars, the alignment of the Sphinx, and the unlocking of the knowledge. It all has to do with that, I believe. I think that the Ethiopia part was a diversion. I don't think it ever left Egypt. That's just my thoughts. Okay. So people would argue and say, okay, well, but this is in the Bible. Like, this wasn't an Egyptian thing. Well, the Ark of the Covenant was created, and that whole story was from centuries and centuries before the Bible was written. The Bible was written like 700 years after evidently all this stuff happened. So it's a retelling of an earlier story. And so, of course, they reframed it as this all happened in Mount Sinai and Jerusalem and that kind of stuff. But there's a very good chance that these were just Atlantean stories and myths that were retold and sort of repackaged into the Bible. A lot of the stories the Bible tells are also told in far earlier religious stories, like the flood stories and all those kinds of things are all told in Sumerian myths and legends, and same with in India, the Hindu myths. And I mean, there's so much overlap between religions that came hundreds and thousands of years before Christianity. So a lot of what's in the Bible, it seems like, is retellings of earlier stories. So the retelling of the Ark of the Covenant could simply just be sort of a rebranding of this far earlier story, and it could have possibly been all Egyptian. Back then, it would have been called Kemet, or the land of Kim. And there's a lot of data that's pointing to all of that was created by the Atlantean survivors. They are the ones who started and founded and built the pyramids and built the Sphinx and built all this stuff. And they did it with very deliberately. And they knew what they were doing, and they were storing and protecting and preserving very valuable information that they knew would be needed at some point in the future. And if you go by what Edgar Cayce says, the sleeping prophet, one of the most accurate psychics America's ever had, the world's ever had, he says that we're coming quickly upon this time. This time is coming now he said from, I think, 2000 to 2038 or something like that period. I mean, we're right in the middle of that, is when this new knowledge was going to be given to us. And he goes in depth about the Atlantean archive and how what's in it, the history of mankind, the history of our genesis of Earth, what happened during their destruction, what led to it, what they learned from it, the information and the technology that they want to keep kind of kept from humanity until we get to a certain point consciously at a conscious development point where we can handle it and do right with it and not destroy ourselves like they did. So all these things were built very specifically, the pyramid and the Sphinx and everything. It's not just for show. That's why we can't make sense of it. We look at it and we're like, it doesn't make sense because it was built for purposes that we can't comprehend. And this knowledge, supposedly, according to this remote viewing of the Ark of the Covenant, according to the Lady and Chris Bledsoe, and according to Edgar Cayce, this knowledge that's going to be bestowed upon humanity is a knowledge that we don't have. So it's not like, oh, some smart people out there already know it, and then the rest of the world's going to know it. It's like, no, according to all these people, it's new knowledge, meaning who we are, where we came from, what's coming up. This is new knowledge. And it seems like it's going to be unveiled at a particular time. And I think that time might be coming. There was one other picture that I wanted to show you that I forgot to, and I just think it's really very, very interesting. So let me share my screen again. So you remember how I showed you on the Ark of the Covenant, it had the two angels on top and their wings were touching? So hopefully you can see this, but this is actually King Tut's tomb. Okay, so just more evidence that the Ark of the Covenant is Egyptian, or at least very influenced by Egyptian. It might even be Atlantean. Is that, see, they're on each corner, there's a goddess, and their wings, it's going to be hard to see, but their wings wrap around the entire tomb, and they touch in the middle, and they perfectly touch, and the wing looks identical to the Ark of the Covenant wing. So I just thought that was super interesting because this is King Tut's tomb, very important tomb and see how it's made with those angels on the sides and see how their wings touch. It's hard to see, but this will be on my Patreon. And this looks very, very similar. So you see what that looks like there. There's these like goddesses on each corner that are like hugging this tomb, and their arms have these wings extended out. They're like the Thunderbird wings, and they're touching right in the middle. Okay. And then, so knowing that, let's go back to the Ark of the Covenant picture here. And you can see how it's almost identical. They're women. You can see they're women angels, women seraphim. You can see how the arms are almost identical. You can see how the wings are almost identical and how they touch in the middle. The Ark of the Covenant, the way it's described in the Bible, is almost identical to King Tut's tomb. That's just incredibly interesting, if you ask me. So I can't be the only one. Let me know what you guys think. All this stuff was blowing my mind. I didn't grow up religious, so I it's like I'm just learning this stuff. It's like when you see a movie that's been out for like 20 years and you want to tell your friends. You're like, dude, I saw Caddyshack the other day. It was so funny. People will be like, yeah, you haven't seen Caddyshack? So that's kind of how I am whenever I keep learning all of these things. I'm like, did you know? And people will be like, yeah, dude, I learned that in Sunday school. Well, I didn't. Okay, so this is all new to me. So, but I can look at it through this lens, this agnostic lens, where I don't want like one side to be right or anything. I just think it's interesting, and I'm just looking at it. And so when I got into this remote viewing data here, I just expected it to be like talking about the Ark of Covenant, what it looks like, where it's at. But then he goes into the meaning of it. He says that it's going to bring a people together. That's very powerful. Like, how would this box, because he's talking about it as just, he calls it a container. It's a container within a container. How would it bring people together? And he says a people, not like people, like 5 guys came together and had coffee over it. No, like a people, meaning like a population, like, bringing a people together is a very powerful thing. And then he talks about how, basically if you try to pry it open, you'll be destroyed by the protectors, and that there's these protectors that are just surrounding it, but they're entities. They're not people. They're these spiritual entities, these seraphim that are protecting this thing. That's very powerful, because it makes you wonder, like, I know people will say, if this thing's been down there, if it's been, in this tunnel in Giza or wherever in the world it is, our military would have found it by now. We would have opened it. We would have done whatever. Well, not if it's literally surrounded and protected by what we would call angels, powerful, spiritual, non-physical beings who evidently can just zap you and destroy you, at their will. So yeah, no, we haven't opened it. We might know exactly where it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's how powerful this thing is. And that's my thought on it, is that we do know where it is, but we know that we can't get into it. It's not openable with brute force or with a key. The key is our conscious evolution. The key is our understanding. Either that or the key is time. There's going to be a time release where maybe something's coming and we need the information in there to preserve humanity. That's absolutely another, aspect of all this. So, as I got more into this, and I was thinking, oh my God, this ark looks very Egyptian to me, and then I was like, maybe it's Egyptian because maybe it looks Egyptian because it is Egyptian. And then that took me to the whole Atlantis part, because, I'm very convinced that Egypt was founded by the surviving Atlanteans. That's where all roads seem to lead. So I don't know what to make of all this. If you've watched my video about Atlantis returning that was done about, I did a whole video about the Chris Bledsoe and the lady and the upcoming prophecy of the Red Star Regulus, and I linked it to the Hopi tribe prophecy and the Red Star Blue Star Kachina, because there's so many similarities. I did a whole video on that, and that took me to Edgar Cayce, and that took me to the Hall of Records underneath the right paw, and between the right paw and the Sphinx. And there's just so many things that I took me this Atlantis route. I had Jason Reza-Jorjani on, and we talked a lot about Atlantis. Me and my wife have connections to Atlantis. We've had past lives there. I have dreams about Atlantis all the time. It's very weird. I feel this strange connection with the Atlantean culture, and I feel like there's something I'm supposed to be doing, playing a role in this somehow, whether it's just getting this information out or whatever. And I'm not even saying all this is true or accurate. I have no idea. I mean, we'll know at some point, I guess we'll know, come, April of next year, if anything happened or not. I have no idea. I'm just going with my intuition. And I'm just pulling on these threads and seeing where they take me. And they keep taking me. Like I don't go into these things thinking this. Like when I went into, I only did this video today because I did the videos last week talking about this guy, the analysis and the assessment of the gateway process. And in there, I talked about, Project Stargate and how that led to what's called Center Lane was the next project, and then Sunstreak. And then I just offhandedly mentioned, oh yeah, in Sunstreak, they actually remote viewed the Ark of the Covenant. And I had like 20 messages, oh, do a deep dive on the Ark of the Covenant remote viewing. I was like, okay. I was like, well, I don't know how exciting that'll be because it's literally just scribbles and a few little stick figure drawings on some paper. There's not a lot to read. And then so I just was like, okay, well, let me just look into it and see if anything pops out at me. And the more I started just casually looking into it, the more just things start, hey, Egypt, Atlantis, this. And then, and it's not that I was like reaching for it or anything, because I didn't go into it thinking there was any connection at all, even with Egypt. It was basically the look of the Ark of the Covenant looks very Egyptian. I mean, it's just obvious. And when you compare it to King Tut's tomb, you compare it to Anubis's chest, it's almost identical. I mean, it's remarkable. And I understand Egypt and Israel aren't very far, and there's a lot of overlap there. But I am beginning to think now that it was Egyptian, from the beginning, and that what we call Egyptian in the early days, what they call Kemet, was actually Atlantis. It was the Atlantean survivors. They didn't call it Atlantis, obviously, because Atlantis, was submerged, but it was the Atlantean survivors. And they're the ones that, established like the mystery schools and trained, Pythagoras and trained probably Plato and trained even Jesus. There's a lot of evidence when you read like Dolores Cannon's book. It's called Jesus and the Essenes, that he was trained by Atlantean survivors. And that's what the Essenes were. And that they trained him and that he went and traveled the world. That missing decade or whatever was him traveling the world and training in these mystery schools with the Druids and with different people and learning all these things. And these are all things that the Atlanteans were preserving and passing down. That's what the mystery schools was preserving all this information and knowledge. They're very, very adamant about preserving their way of life, their thinking, their history, and these lessons, because they know it's all going to come in handy one day. It's going to, they know that there's this cyclical nature of this world, and the things that they've learned and the things that they've preserved will help us at some point. And that's why they've been preserving these lineages and these secret schools. And that, Pythagoras, Plato, even Jesus, Mary, they were all part of this network of these secret schools. And that started very early. I mean, that was the origin of Egypt in that area. And when you look at like the pyramids and the Sphinx and all that through that lens, it starts to make a lot more sense why, these primitive Egyptians, you're talking about thousands of years ago when we were just out of the hunter-gatherer phase, we're able to build these things that nowadays we couldn't even build. I mean, there's no way. If we could, we would have done it. Somebody out there would have built a replica of, the pyramids. And you can't do it, and not just the scale, but like inside, like some of the stones that they have inside that are elevated and stuff. We don't know how they did it. We don't know how they did it. And it doesn't really make any sense from like a, the design aspect of how the tunnels and chambers and everything are inside. It doesn't make sense to us because they didn't make it for practical purposes. There's a very utilitarian purpose for it that is beyond us. How did they do this thousands and thousands of years ago without technology, without machinery? And they did all this. Why? For what? And we still can't do it today, and we can't figure it out. There's something else going on there. And I think that it's all going to play a role coming up. I really think in the near future, Egypt, and especially that Giza plateau there, where the three pyramids are and where the Sphinx is, I think, it's just my opinion, I think it's going to become a very important part of the world coming up. And I'm just pulling these threads and seeing where it takes me, and it keeps taking me there. So I don't know. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Please leave them in the comments below. Please like this, share this video, comment, tell me all the things that you think. Tell me where I got things wrong. Tell me, all the things. I want to know. I want to learn. I want to grow. And I want to keep pulling on this thread. So give me suggestions. Where do I go next? Where does this take me? I'm listening, guys. We'll do another video on Thursday, and we're going to do our live on Saturday. And all this information will be on Patreon. So go and be a part of that. And anyways, thank you guys for watching. Love you all. Have a beautiful evening. Peace.